What's up, guys? It's Mickey from Dynasty from the Mountaintops. We got Jeremy here. Jimmy's going to join us shortly. Jeremy's going to maybe have to leave early. It's going to be an insane show. But first off, how you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing good, sir. How are yourself?
Doing well. We do have a little bit of technical difficulties, so bear with us on that. But what we're going to do here, we're going to go through. First segment's going to be a team breakdown. We're going to switch it up a little bit. Since Jim's not here, we're going to make fun of his team in golf, which is going to be fun. And then we're going to do some player breakdown with Malik Nabers, which is a new segment we're going to test out here today. Second segment's going to be production versus hope. This is when we're hoping. Speaking of hope, this is when we're hoping that Jimmy's going to be here. This is one of his big things he wanted to talk about in the last few weeks. Rookies, high picks versus that are not stars yet or proven vets in a tough spot. We're going to go through all of that, and I'm sure a bunch more of just ridiculousness. So first off, team breakdown. We got Jim's team in golf called the 2012 Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that's because he won one game and hasn't won since. But anyway.
He's at 2-9 now. Looking at it, he's at 2-9. But yeah, he did recently make that change to 2012. But he's presently at a 2-9 record. And with the points for, he is dead last.
So we talked about this quite a bit already. However, just to give you an idea, I'm going to run through his good players, which is going to be very quick. Don't get me wrong. So we're going to have, he has Patrick Mahomes, no running backs, no good running backs, let me rephrase that. Wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is a stud. Nacua, who is a stud. Rashee Rice, who will probably be another stud next year. So he does have some good wide receivers. Absolutely nothing in the tight end side. And then so much draft capital, it's disgusting. And we could talk about what draft capital he has throughout, but there are like 8 number 1 picks in the next 2 years, I think I see. So obviously he is one of the bottom feeders looking to build from the ground up. So Jeremy, what do you see when you look at his team?
I think, honestly, a great breakdown by you. I have stressed to him in the past that his wide receiver room, considering how, lack of better terms, poor his team is, his wide receiver room is definitely the solid foundation to what I assume he's going to build on. His draft capital is a great mention. You did count that correctly. I was with you. I'm looking at 8 first-round picks in a 14-team league in the next 2 years. That is big, 4 in each year, so he has it well spread out as well. I think he's going to be able to do well with the draft capital. But to your point, it's basically those 3 wide receivers, one of which is injured for the year, and his draft cap.
Yeah, so actually that one wide receiver who's injured plays into his favor because he's probably getting the number 1 pick. He also has Patrick Mahomes, who's been looking a little bit better as of late. I still don't think he's a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. In fantasy, he's probably one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the NFL.
Nice save.
We talk fantasy, and I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback in fantasy because of the rushing, very lack of rushing, even though he has it in his arsenal. He doesn't use it very often. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I've been trying to get him off. We talked last week, actually, or a few days ago, I guess, me and Jimmy about a trade for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I've been trying to get him off his team for 2 weeks, 3 weeks now, and he just hasn't budged quite yet. Still think I'm going to be able to get there eventually. He just loves picks, so we'll see.
He does. He does love his picks.
Which is a problem because I don't have many left. But what I see, obviously, we talked about his strategy of having a wrap ton of quarterback or backup quarterbacks, 3 of which are now starters that I see in Mac Jones, Desmond Ridder, and Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush for the rest of the year. Desmond Ridder, we'll see how long that lasts, to be honest with you. And Mac Jones, I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is coming back or what the deal is there.
I would be just personal opinion. I would be shocked if Trevor Lawrence does return, just considering what their current record is and the current state of the team. And I just nonchalantly, not that I have much stock or investment, but I did nonchalantly read that with Minshew out for the year and AOC not necessarily prepped for this week, it sounds like we could get at least Ritter for another week or two.
Yeah, so obviously the Raiders are doing nothing this year. They have Crosby and then everybody else on the team. So Desmond Ritter starting this week, I would want to see what I have it, to be honest with you. I mean, there's not many pass catchers out. Well, Brock Bowers as well. Don't get me wrong. I forgot about that, obviously. But other than those two players, one on defense and the tight end, they have really nothing around. So why not see what Desmond Ritter can do for you? See if he might be the future of the team and not have to worry about quarterback. So we'll see about that. He gets a second chance. We'll see if he's able to come up big there or not. But I'm sure he won't be on Jimmy's team if Desmond Ritter does end up being the starter.
That's true.
So he's already trying to get Cooper Rush off his team. He said in the chat in the golf league, he has too many points. We got to get him off the team. So that logic makes no sense to me, but I also play in a win now mentality. So
I fully support, I guess, in a sense, the insanity behind Jim's logic in regards to the quarterback hoarding. It did not work in his favor. That's the truth. But that's just situational. It's not necessarily a game plan by him. My concern with Jim's team is when does it stop? Now, I know that he has periods of which it stops because he is contending significantly in your DVP league. But that is something that I tend to try to get off of Jim that I have yet to, is when this stops. For example, we know right now his wide receiver class in this team is phenomenal, and he has 8 first-round picks. Why he continues to block Amon-Ra St. Brown and Puka Nacua baffles me. Because, I mean, yeah, you're obtaining as much value as you can, but certainly sitting on 8 first-round picks in the next 2 years, when does the build stop? And I guess that's where my disconnect is with this current logic on his golf team versus standard aspect of approach. Because, again, if he's going to continue to move the only players that we jokingly say that are worth a damn on his team, when does the building stop and the contention begin?
Absolutely, and especially with the number 1 draft pick that he will take next year. He already basically has it locked up in Genty from Boise State. He already has said, like, there's no chance I'm taking anyone else. So he is going to have what we believe is going to be a good running back in Genty. Ashton Genty, that's his first name. And that means you have 4 to 5 years with that pick, in my opinion. That's what I start when I think of a first round, second round running back. That's where my head starts, is 4 to 5 years. That's it. After that, you might get a Saquon, you might get a Henry, you might get like some of these players that are playing right now. But these are the cream of the crop.
Right. And not to interrupt you, I apologize, but that's I'm with you on that. I think if you're drafting any type of running back in a rookie draft, I think you got to basically expect to carry their rookie contract only. After that is always surplus, especially the way that the league is now running with them 2, 3, 4 running backs per team. I think if you're drafting a rookie running back that high, I think the best basis you can do is plan on just carrying out their rookie contract and hoping for the best afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not much else I see in this team, to be 100% honest. He has 4 of the 4 first-round picks. One's mine. I should be in the playoffs, so at worst it's going to be a 108. I think Tandree's basically locked in as well, in like 3rd or 4th place, so he's going to be a late pick as well. So those aren't as valuable as they're showing on the draft capital right now, but the number 1 pick is going to be Genty, and he gets that. He gets another lower pick in the X team. I don't know how to say the name, but it doesn't really matter. It's like a middle of the road, lower tier team.
And I think this is where Jim and I kind of differentiate, because he has such a fine-tooth comb over the current spacing of those picks, where I necessarily don't. Like, obviously, yeah, you're going to want the 2nd, or 3rd, or 4th overall pick, but to downplay those other picks, the later picks in the 1st round, or even early in the 2nd round, I personally don't like to do that, because those are still valuable picks, especially in the league size that we're at with 14 teams, and as being a 2 QB, you know you're going to lose some quarterbacks in those first few picks of the 1st round. So even those late 1st round picks, early 2nd round picks, even at a 14-team league, you're still going to be able to acquire some decent talent.
Yeah, and the way they're talking, since we're talking about a draft capital so much, we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming draft possibilities.
Sure.
They're talking about all these running backs that are coming out. You have these 3 wide receivers. You have Patrick Mahomes, who I think's a 2, but he could be a 1. We've seen him as 1 many, many years. You get these running backs, and then trade some of these picks, and all of a sudden, you got a roster that is your DVP roster. It is the one that you can contend with, and it really only takes 2 years. And I could see that in this, but you have to get rid of some of these quarterbacks.
He's got to clear up some of the bench space, and he's got to approach the draft accordingly. I think regardless of the situation, he's going to be able to not only get Genty, but if he decides to carry him or trade him, he's going to get decent value for him. But in my opinion, like the analogy I wanted to throw back to Jim is in one of our next discussions. It's kind of like buying a car. As soon as you draft Genty, the value could decrease a little bit in that pick just because of how the value is. So, like, my point being, if Jim is intending on flipping these picks and utilizing this roster and building off of this wide receiver room, then yes, I think he is in a great spot. But I do think he needs to consider shipping that potential Genty pick if, in fact, he's not ready to compete. Because then by the time that Genty is either A, obtaining mileage, or B, something, God forbid, happens that could lose value, and he's not in a position where he can use him on a weekly basis, he might want to move that first round on the pick or draft and trade.
Absolutely. And this actually happened in the DVP League with Bijan Robinson. He took the number 1 overall, thought he was going to be a little bit closer than he was. Some picks didn't fall his way, and he got rid of Robinson the same year. Now, for a pretty good return, don't get me wrong.
Course,
I don't remember exactly what it was. But he still had the number 1 pick, tried to shop it a little bit. He was looking for way too much, as he does sometimes. Most of the time. Yeah, most of the time. And then found someone to buy Bijan later and get that capital for it. But now you wasted a year. Like, I don't care how many other picks you had. You wasted that year because that was your guy. That was who you were supposed to set around, was your 101 of the our second year in the dynasty. Mm-hmm. And that was what he was banking on. Again, some things fell through. He traded him mid-season that year for a pretty good return. But still, like, if that happens again in this, with the players that we have in this league, I think some of them are pretty strong players. I don't know how he's going to get the return that he got for Bijan.
Yeah, but I think that kind of plays into what we've repeated on this pod a few times now. Is basically the bases it off the league. Again, Bijan, I'm in 4 leagues. Bijan can go for a different price in all 4. It really all depends on the league, the values, and everyone's willing to spend. So I do think he'd be able to flip it. But I think, in my opinion, this is where I would start. Like, for example, right now, our golf league. As soon as I bowed out for 2024, I immediately start planning for 2025. If he is, in fact, focusing on a Genty, which I believe he is, because I do agree with you that he has, for my terminology, a player crush toward Genty at this moment. But if he does, again, want to utilize him and use him and draft him and build around him, I think he needs to start acting on this golf team, getting rid of some of these quarterbacks that aren't going to get moved, and start building in on some of the things. He's so far below on the points that he can start to build and not have any repercussions because he is so damningly low on those points. I personally think if he is focusing on trying to compete next year with this draft capital he has, I think he needs to start moving.
I absolutely agree. But we're going to stop talking about him now because he just joined. So we had a little bit of fun there. He can listen to what we said on the cast later on here. So, Jim, we just reached our new segment, Player Profile, Malik Nabers. Since we haven't heard your voice yet, how are you?
Oh, my goodness. I miss you guys.
Wish we could say the same, Jim. But
wow.
Silence.
I'm sorry. I hopped on. I could read mean messages from your wife, Mickey. I could just do that instead.
Whoa.
That wouldn't be good.
Whoa.
Anyway, Jim, tell me. I wanted to bring up Malik Nabers for a very, very specific reason, and we talked about production versus hope in the second segment here, and he's shown the production in the first half of the year, or the first quarter of the year, I would say, but because of the rest of the team, he's kind of fell down a little bit. So, give me some your thoughts on Malik Nabers.
Well, I think it depends on where you're at, right? If you are someone who's competing, then you're probably maybe looking to sell them. If you're tanking, you're looking towards next year and you're keeping him because he's not probably going to put up a lot of points, and that will help you with draft position. So I think it depends on where you're at. Like if I'm competing, I'm probably seeing maybe I could flip him for like the CeeDee Lamb right now is down. Could I get Malik for CeeDee Lamb straight up? Or would I do maybe a Drake London plus? I'm looking at whatever the bottom teams have that I want, and what could I do to maybe split that Neighbors asset and still get, more points probably than what he would score for the rest of the year, and maybe get a free first. Something like that, and kind of see what happens.
So you believe if you're a contending team, get him off your roster for someone who might not be a contending team anymore and one of their better wide receivers. That's what you're saying.
Because the reality is, it's like we knew his ceiling was going to be a little bit lower this year, regardless, and it got worse. So I don't trust any of those quarterbacks throwing him the ball for the rest of the year. And on top of that, they're probably they didn't start Drew Lock. My thinking is that they're tanking. They're going for that best draft pick possible so they could draft a rookie next year. So that doesn't sound very exciting either for him. So that's where I'm trying to what can I do to buy a more secure asset that's going to score more points and not live in that Hopium world. I hope he does it. Give me the points and give me what I can do this year and try to win, and maybe get some pretty, side pieces like a first round pick, maybe an extra running back thrown in, something like that. That would give me a better chance to compete in the playoffs.
No, I love that idea there. Jeremy, what do you think about this?
I'm going to piggyback exactly off of Jim and agree. He nailed it on the head. Like we knew the talent was there, but we did not think that the quarterback play was going to be there, the team, but it fell off a cliff. Like we expected to at least get through this year, maybe next year, maybe there was some hope on Daniel Jones, but it's been a complete train wreck. I'm with Jim. Neighbors is an elite talent, generational talent, fantastic dynasty talent. But if I'm looking to win now, Neighbors ain't getting me the Neighbors-esque points that he's rumored to be getting till probably at this point next year, if not later. Because again, I agree with Jim. I think they're tanking at this point. That's why they skipped Lock. And then if they're bringing in a rookie quarterback, who knows what they're bringing in? So you got growing pains with them potentially, and everything in between. So I'm full board with Jim. Not a knock on Neighbors, but a knock on his current value or his current point production now as a contender.
So I guess my biggest question, I agree with you guys as well. Like I would try to get Neighbors off my team if I'm in the hunt to win. If I'm even making the playoffs but don't think I'm going to win, I keep him because he is going to be an asset at some point. I don't mean to interject here, but I do want to kind of play off that as well. It does depend on your contending team per se. Like I have a contending team right now, and I do have a lot of the older wide receivers like your Lockett's, your Calvin Ridley's, those types of individuals. So maybe a Neighbors would be something I would want to keep in my back pocket if my veteran wide receivers are getting it done. So I do want to stress that would come into play, that if I'm obtaining some of the points there, having that backbone for that dynasty aspect for the next year or two wouldn't be too bad. And
I also want to reinforce, there's only a handful of trades that I would even trade him for if I was a contending team. If I'm trading away Neighbors, it's one of the top dogs. It's an Amon. It's a CD. It's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I'm not trading him for Darnell Mooney, who's wide receiver 12 this year, and a first. I'm getting a great player back. I'm just seeing if I can maybe tear down a little bit, still get more points than what he's going to produce, and compete that way. That's the only type of move I'll make.
Good correction. Good addition.
Yeah, so I'm glad you added that because no offense to Drake London whatsoever. He's had a really nice year. But when you put him in that category of the trade aspect, that's when I was like, oh, okay, you're just trying to get a better wide receiver for this year, not necessarily a golden asset, if that makes sense.
Yes, I mean, you wouldn't do Drake London in a first for Neighbors right now?
It's close, to be honest with you.
I would have to know, not right now, like the estimate. I would have to know where that pick is before I even consider it. I'd have to know where that pick is.
I'm a huge Penix guy. You guys know that. We have yet to see him in an NFL game, really. So how good is Drake London going to be with Penix? He has 1 year probably left with Kirk Cousins, is my guess, after this year. So, yeah, I'm going Neighbors all day on that, even with the first, especially if it's not a top three.
I know if I'm competing, I'm taking Drake London in a first. I mean, I'd be curious. Like, I don't know if any of you guys can look up real quick. Like, how many? Like, where is Drake points per game? Like, I'd be really curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Drake's good. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's really good, but he wouldn't be on that tier that I would think of to trade.
If any team, like, you're making moves to win right now, and Drake London in a first would be a great move because not only are you getting a receiver who's going to outscore Neighbors the rest of the season, but you're also getting a first that you can attach to something else, upgrade, go buy a running back, buy that tight end, attach that to a quarterback and tier up. Like, it gives you so much more roster flexibility instead of holding onto that Hopium. I hope he does this where, let's be honest, the next 2 or 3 years could look very bleak for Neighbors with that feeling. Like, I see right now Neighbors to be on a path where what George Pickens is. A lot of hype coming out. We're very excited for him, but he's had nothing but terrible quarterbacks for the last few years, and it really held back until maybe, hopefully, Russell Wilson finally unlocked that. But do you want to wait 2 years for that? No, I'd rather be able to do a lot more with that roster spot than keep hoping.
No, and that's a good point. We got to move on here, but
Drake London is wide receiver 6 in our golf league with a 12.5 points per game, half PPR.
I'd say 12.5.
Half PPR, yeah, average. Malik Nabers is at a 14 wide receiver in our golf league with 13.16 half PPR. So he's overproducing him with a worse quarterback, and he lost like 3 games due to his concussion.
Right.
I mean, that's a conversation for another time, but how can the points
yeah.
be lower but be a higher wide receiver? That's weird.
He missed games during the year.
He missed games, and he had one game that was like a 28 pointer, so it's inflated a little bit.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, he the first quarter of the year he went off for 20 points. I think 2 or 3 weeks.
Regardless, still give me Drake London in a first.
If I'm competing, if I'm competing, I'll take that because again, that in my point, it helps blanket some of the older wide receivers that would have in this fake situation. So yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, I would probably do it, but it would hurt inside a little bit knowing that I might give up, quote unquote, Justin Jefferson of the future.
Yeah.
To be honest, like that's.
But I mean, you can make the case Drake London for him. You can make the case that Drake London outscore him next year. Huge win.
You could make the case for that, and that could be the huge win. I'm looking down the road a little bit further, but if you're a contender, you have to look at this year and maybe next year.
Yep.
So you're right about that. Like I said, I'd probably make the move, but it would be a little bit of like a throwing up inside. So moving on, the number one thing that Jimmy has been talking about, I don't know how long now, and he even referred to it when we were talking about Malik Nabers, production versus hope. So I have 3 different ideas of what you were trying to say. So I was looking at rookies, high picks that haven't developed how we thought they would, that aren't stars yet, and then proven vets in tough spots. Jim, if you want to talk about whatever side you were kind of thinking of.
Well, Mickey, you and I were debating this the other day. It's like, do we buy production that we're currently sitting, or do we buy what they've done in the past or what we think they'll do in the future, right? Like you and I kind of had a heated debate about CeeDee Lamb versus Amon, where, CeeDee Lamb will be back to normal next year, but right now, the production that's in front of me, Amon has a much better outlook. So when you're trying to make trades, do you try to, base it off of what you think is going to happen or what they've done in the past, or are you living in the moment, right? Like, I think that's the tricky part. Like, I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a really great case study because all the data says he's going to be a stud. Like, Jacksonville's using him in all the ways that will produce fantasy points, air yards, routes per run, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is Trevor Lawrence looks like kind of a bust. Mac Jones is not any better. Once again, his ceiling is very limited. So you go out and maybe spend 2 firsts on Brian Thomas Jr. because you're super excited for him and everything looks promising, or do you wait? And I think that's a very interesting question because if you buy now, you're kind of buying him at his peak, But yes, is there room for more growth? There is, but you're gambling then. Or do you just kind of wait to, if I'm going to spend you first, like, he needs to be a stud, and then I will wait? Or do you gamble and do you buy now? So I think it's a really interesting conversation that might need more time on in general. But I know for me, it's usually about where am I at in my team? Am I comfortable taking on that risk? Like, I look at my DVP team where my team is built, studs, ready to go. That's the kind of team where, like, I want some risk. I'll buy Brian Thomas Jr. cheap. I'll buy a Lad McConkey cheap because if he hits, that's just another prospect that I can do something with. But if I miss, I'm okay. I'm covered. I still have enough pieces. So I think it kind of depends on where your team is at and what type of risk you're willing to take on with your team.
No, and that's a great point. And I'm going to let Jeremy talk here because you said player crush that I know Jeremy has because I tried to get him off his team. Yeah. So go for it.
I'm gonna go with you. What you said, Jim. I'm gonna go with a situational and depends on the team. My mind's made up mid-year. That's been evident. My mind's made up on what my team's gonna be by mid-year. So I do have some. I'm going by. If I'm spending the two first, I used this analogy earlier at the beginning of the pod, and I'll use it now because you're here now, Jim. I look at the players as like a car purchase aspect, where I would much rather buy a car with a few miles on it when I know the type of car that I'm getting versus investing in a brand new car not knowing. I guess that's why I want to play into my player crushes, for example, is because I take my time, my research, invest in the actual players once they're established in a team, in a depth chart, everything that's aspect. I follow college, I follow the scouts, I follow the combine some. But this is where, like, this time of year is where I'm preparing for next year. So, to your point, I'm spending those types of draft capital on a player that I know I can get it. I spent something very similar on a Rashee Rice in another league I was in. Because I know that what I'm getting. Obviously, he blew his knee, but I know I'm getting the wide receiver one under Patrick Mahomes for the next 5 years. So that was something that was an investment that I know I can spend because I have seen what works. I have seen what he's doing with the team, and I know that my investment is going to be worth it there.
I love it. And the way that I look at this is more, it's situational. But like you said, Jim, you have a team that you created that can take those risks. And I did the exact same thing in the offseason. I took chances on players that were discounted that I wasn't even sure about them, but I was like, you know what? If they hit, they're going to be gangbusters hit, right? And they were able to help me out whenever I had some injuries, like I said before. Those high picks that aren't stars yet are the ones that I focus on, because if they're not stars yet and they have that pedigree and you have the situation where you're able to make moves to get those players, the high pedigree usually hits at some point, even if it's just a year or two. Hopefully it's the year you get it, is the way I look at it. All right, so Jimmy had to hop off. We got him for, 10 minutes or so. That's all we need for. He talks enough.
That's all we need, honestly. Like, that's enough. Like, we could do this more often. It's just a Jim segment as opposed to him being here the whole time.
Right. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, in this production versus hope, and I kind of wish Jimmy was in on this still and kind of want to get his opinion on it later on, is are we crowning rookies too soon?
Yes. I'll bluntly jump into that.
That was quick.
Sorry. Yeah, I think we are. Like, again, this goes into what I was saying a little earlier. Like, everyone, including myself, like, I worship football. I love it. Everything about it. It's everything about it. I look forward to it all year and everything in between. So by the time that these rookies are coming into camp and post-combine in July, you are so foaming at the bit for these rookies. The simplest catch play that they do, it's fantastic. This goes into that analogy of the car. Am I going to spend $50,000 on a car that everyone's telling me is good, that is from a good make and model, everyone's saying it is good? Or do I want to take a car that has 2,000 miles on it, just came back in and everything's all nice and clean, But I know for a fact that that car has been taken care of. I know for a fact that that car has potential to be a car that is going to be a safe car for me. So therefore, that's where I go into it. I think everyone goes super crazy on the rookies. You have your ability to have rookie drafts. Shoot your shot at the rookie draft. If you don't get him there, in my opinion, take a step back. That's kind of where I go. If you have your player crushes, I have Brian Thomas Jr. was a big player crush of mine. I drafted him like 7th overall in our rookie draft. That was our reach at that time. I didn't care. I wanted him. I wanted to go for him, and that was it. But I didn't want to spend the prices on that because of the rookie hype. So, a very worded answer, but yes, I will flat out say that when the rookie picks are going for an absorbent amount of cost before they even take a snap, that is just crazy. Look at Nabers right now this year. Coming into it, he had a crazy hype. Now, you're like we talked about, we're looking at, 16 months now before he's going to be somewhat relevant.
Yeah, and I look at Marvin Harrison Jr. Is he going to be great? Yes. I truly believe he's going to be unbelievable. I like the quarterback that he has, obviously. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. The production hasn't been there this year. So, did you waste the first or second pick overall on a guy when maybe you were close already and you bought that pick and sold the rest of your capital for it? Or something like that, and you're not getting any. I mean, what's it been, 2 weeks over 15 points, I think? It's been bad. Trust me, I know I have one other keeper league, not something we talk about here. And I think the reason that we put a crown on these quote-unquote stud, can't-miss prospects is because my favorite part of fantasy, whether it's redraft, keeper, dynasty, whatever else there is out there that I'll probably end up playing at some point, guillotine is the draft. And in dynasty, you only get to draft the rookies.
Yes.
So it makes it such an inflated price because that's all you're talking about over the offseason is, okay, what rookies are there? What can I look at? And some people look at it like Jim and me. I've been watching college football all year to see who I want next year. That's why I was huge on Keon Coleman. He was like Evans, who, if you threw up the ball, he was coming down with it most of the time in Florida State. He didn't have as great a production as we expected, but that's because that team was just gangbusters all over. Or Devon Achane. I took a chance on him in this, not really a chance, it was a second round pick. So what kind of chance?
Right. So, yeah.
But I was all over him. Damian Pierce, I was all over him once I found out.
Yeah, I was a Damian Pierce fan myself. I'm with you on that one.
I didn't know anything about these guys before in college, to be honest with you, these two. But when I heard what they were, what their talent was, and who they went to, I was like, Devon Achane with the Miami Dolphins is going to be unreal. Now, bring him into the Steelers, and we'll see how he does.
Oh boy.
You know what I mean? Like, they have the offensive line, they have the speed. It is a speed game, and he's one of the fastest in the NFL. When I saw that, he was a focal point for me to draft, and I did. I overdrafted him. I put a quote-unquote crown on. That's just my biggest example. I'm sure you have them out there as well. Like you said, BTJ. Now, you drafted him a little bit higher. He probably would have went 109, 110. And
a little higher at that point. Yeah, but that's the thing. I guess that's where I don't like to overpay on the players until I see what I'm getting. So I'll draft what I can. I'll do what I can to draft, but then that's when I'll sit back. So there was probably about 6 or 8 rookies in this draft class that I really liked, and I only drafted about 3 of them in our actual rookie drafts, but I have all 6. So my theory is, if I miss out on rookies in a rookie draft, instead of spending that top tier capital at the draft time, if I'm in a situation like golf, where I am in the crux, I'm not looking for the CeeDee Lambs or anything like that. I'm looking for the dudes who I missed out on, who I have done homework on, who I have done my research on, who I have gotten attached to one way or another. And that's who I'm getting for those cheaper prices, because as soon as those rookies hit the field, that's when the prices are tanking. Look at the examples we just gave. Marvin Harrison price went down after a few weeks. Nabers price went down after a few weeks. Bowers price went down as soon as he got drafted because nobody liked him in Vegas. So I wait for after that, but I sit like a spider. I sit back and I grab them accordingly as the season goes.
No, absolutely, and I 100% agree with you. I hate to cut you off, but we got to go.
I had a
We're gonna
feeling,
get
yes.
kicked out here in a second. But
This was
for
fun.
Jimmy, who barely joined us, Jeremy, and who was with us the whole time, I'm Mickey. This is Dynasty from the Mountaintops. Make sure you check us out on YouTube, Apple, Podbean. Subscribe and comment as well, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for running. See you guys.
That's it.